There is a moment, roughly 30 seconds long, that Hermann Göring would spend the rest of the war trying to forget. Berlin, the 30th of January 1943. It is the 10th anniversary of the Nazis taking power, and the city has dressed up for it. Flags hang dead in the cold air. Loudspeakers are bolted to lamp posts. In factories and kitchens and barracks across the Reich, people are gathered around radios, waiting for the Reichsmarschall to speak. On the flak batteries ringing the capital, the gun crews are relaxed. Gloves off. Coffee going cold in tin mugs. Nobody expects anything at 11 in the morning. Bombers come at night, in great slow herds, and they come high, and they die on the way. That is simply how the war works. And besides, they have been promised. Göring himself had boasted that no enemy aircraft would ever cross the borders of the Reich. If one ever did, he said, they could call him by another name. Then, a gunner hears it. Not the deep, throbbing drone of a bomber stream. Something thin and hard and rising, low over the rooftops, the sound arriving at almost the same instant as the shape that makes it. 3 aircraft. Barely higher than the chimneys. The air raid sirens start after the first bombs land. And across every loudspeaker in Germany, in front of the entire nation, the voice of the second most powerful man in the country stops. Mid-sentence. Here is what makes it unbearable. The machines that did that had no armor, no gun turrets, not one single machine gun. They were built from plywood, balsa wood and glue, in workshops that had spent the 1930s making furniture, shop fronts and pianos. And the British Air Ministry had very nearly thrown the whole idea in the bin. To understand why nobody wanted this aeroplane, you have to understand how badly Britain was losing the air war before it. Roll back to December 1939. 22 Wellington bombers fly out over the Heligoland Bight in broad daylight, in tight formation, bristling with gun turrets. The theory was elegant: pack the bombers close, let their guns overlap, and the fighters won't get through. 12 of those 22 did not come home. The theory died over the North Sea, and it took the crews with it. So Bomber Command did the only thing left. It went at night. And at night, a new problem waited. In August 1941, a civil servant named David Butt was handed hundreds of target photographs and asked a simple question: are we actually hitting anything? The answer nearly broke the RAF. Of the crews who came home claiming to have bombed the target, only about 1 in 3 had put their bombs within 5 miles of it. 5 miles. Think about what that means for the men. You climb into a cold aluminium tube at 10 at night. You fly for 6 or 7 hours through freezing black air, watching searchlights swing across the sky like fingers looking for you. You watch other bombers with friends in them turn into orange smears and fall away. And there is a very good chance you did all of that to plow a field. The equipment itself was the trap, because the answer to fighters was always more guns. More guns means turrets. Turrets mean gunners. Gunners mean more oxygen, more ammunition, more armor, more parachutes, more weight. And weight is the enemy of speed. A heavy bomber is slow. A slow bomber gets caught. A bomber that gets caught needs more guns. It's a spiral, and every turn of it was paid for in 19-year-olds. There was one more squeeze. Aluminium Britain in 1940 was rationing metal, rationing skilled labor, rationing the space in the aircraft factories that were already being bombed. Every ounce of light alloy was fought over. The country needed a bomber that could hit accurately, survive the trip, and be built out of something Germany couldn't take away from it. Nobody in authority believed such a thing could exist, except one man, and he wasn't a ministry man at all. Geoffrey de Havilland was an aircraft builder from the wrong side of the establishment fence. His company didn't make grim machines of war. It made fast, elegant, beautiful things: racers and airliners and mailplanes. In 1934, his DH-88 Comet, a slender wooden splinter of an aeroplane, had won the great air race from England to Australia. Wooden, that word matters. While the rest of the industry chased metal, his people had spent years getting very good at building strong structures out of plywood. And in 1938, de Havilland began saying something that sounded, to serious men in uniform, close to insane. Take the guns off. Not fewer guns. No guns. No turrets. No gunners. 2 men, sitting side by side, and nothing behind them but empty air. His argument was pure arithmetic. Every turret costs you drag. Every gunner costs you weight. Strip all of it away. Bolt on 2 of the finest engines Britain could build, and you get a bomber that simply outruns the fighters sent to kill it. Speed is the armor. The Air Ministry's reaction was somewhere between amusement and contempt. Unarmed? In 1938? When the entire doctrine of the age said a bomber must defend itself? They told him what they wanted instead. Gun turrets. Please. Metal. Please. Something sensible. He was politely, repeatedly ignored. The project should have died there. It survived because of one senior officer who was willing to stake his own name on it, Air Marshal Sir Wilfrid Freeman, who kept the order alive when others tried to cancel it, and who was mocked for it. Around the corridors, the aeroplane picked up a nickname, Freeman's Folly. So the work went underground. Not literally, but close. The design team was moved out of the main factory to a quiet moated house in Hertfordshire called Salisbury Hall, away from bombing, away from paperwork, away from committees. A handful of engineers, in an old country house, building the thing nobody had asked for. Twice the contract was threatened. Twice it clung on. And through the worst months of 1940 through Dunkirk. Through the Battle of Britain, when Britain needed fighters today and had no patience for wooden experiments, a small team kept quietly gluing plywood together. They had no idea they were building the most versatile aircraft of the entire war. Now picture how it was actually made. Not riveted. Not welded. Molded. The fuselage was formed in 2 great halves, over huge concrete molds. Like a walnut shell. Thin sheets of birch plywood on the outside and inside, and sandwiched between them, a layer of balsa. That's the same feather-light wood that model aeroplanes are made from. Then the 2 halves were laid open like a book. All the wiring, all the control cables, all the plumbing was fitted, while a man could still stand inside the open shell. Then the halves were glued together. Screwed, banded, left to cure. And here is the part that broke people's brains. The strength wasn't in a metal skeleton. There barely was a skeleton. The strength was in the skin itself, the whole shell taking the load together, the way an eggshell is far stronger than it looks, right up until it isn't. Because it was wood, it could be built by people who had never seen an aircraft factory. Cabinet makers, coach builders, furniture firms, piano manufacturers. Small workshops scattered across the country, in barns and sheds and back rooms, each turning out a wing spar or a tail section impossible for the Luftwaffe to find. Impossible to bomb. It used almost none of Britain's precious aluminium. And when the finished machine rolled out at Hatfield in November 1940, painted bright yellow, people laughed at it. It looked wrong. Too clean. Too smooth. No turret hump on its back, no gun blisters, no ugly bulges. It looked like something built for a rich man's air race, not for war. The wooden wonder, they called it. And they weren't always being kind. On the 25th of November 1940, it flew. Then, they took it to the testing establishment and put it up against the fastest thing Britain owned, the Spitfire. The wooden bomber, carrying a bomb load, walked away from the fighter. Nearly 400 miles an hour. Faster than the Messerschmitts waiting across the channel. Faster than anything that could be sent to intercept it. And when it was empty of bombs, it climbed like a startled bird. Nobody in that room laughed again. What the Mosquito did to the Germans was not, in the end, mostly about explosives. It was about the destruction of a feeling. The feeling of being safe somewhere. Start with the flak. Anti-aircraft fire doesn't shoot at where an aircraft is, it shoots at where the aircraft is going to be. Seconds from now. Gunners need time. Time to hear it, time to track it, time to predict it. A Mosquito at rooftop height gave them none of those things. It arrived with its own sound. By the time the crews looked up, it was already past them, and the shells burst in empty sky behind it. Then the fighters. A Focke-Wulf sitting on an airfield needs minutes to start, roll, take off and climb. In those minutes, the Mosquito is 30 miles away and still accelerating. Interception wasn't hard. It was arithmetic, and the arithmetic said no. But the true horror came at night. Because the RAF took this unarmed bomber and made a version that did carry guns. Cannon in the nose, radar in the nose cone, and they sent it out not to bomb, but to hunt the German night fighters over their own airfields. Understand what that did. A German night fighter crew's most dangerous hour was over the bomber stream. Their safest moment, the moment they exhaled, was coming home, throttled back, wheels down, flaps down, landing lights on, slow and heavy and blind. The Mosquito turned that moment into an execution. Crews began arriving over their own bases and refusing to land. They'd circle in the dark, running their tanks dry. Some switched their radar off entirely, terrified it was being homed in on. Some aborted before they ever reached the bombers. Some, jumpy and exhausted, flew into the ground on approach without a shot being fired at them. The Germans had a word for it: Mosquito-fear. And where fear goes, rumors follow. They said it couldn't be shot down. They said the wooden hull made it hard to see on radar. They said there was nothing solid inside it to hit, that shells went through the plywood and out the other side without exploding. Some of that was true. Much of it wasn't. It didn't matter. Belief is a weapon. And at the very top, it was eating Göring alive. After being humiliated on live radio, he raged to his staff about it, that the British with no light alloy to spare could take a piano factory and produce an aeroplane his own industry, with everything it needed, could not match or catch. His own men, meanwhile, had started calling it something simpler: the Timber Terror. Now watch what the idea could do when someone had the nerve to use it. The 31st of October, 1944, Aarhus, in occupied Denmark. The Gestapo have taken over 2 university buildings, and inside them are the records' names, addresses, networks that will destroy the Danish resistance within days. You cannot bomb that from 20,000 feet. Not without erasing the town. So 25 Mosquitoes come in across the Danish coast so low that people would later say they were looking down at them from upstairs windows. So low that one aircraft came home with pieces of the roof it had clipped still lodged in it. The bombs went in through the walls. The files burned. The buildings came down. Surgical. Exactly the thing the doctrine of 1939 said was impossible. Now hold that image, and set it against another night. The 30th of March 1944, Nuremberg, nearly 800 heavy bombers, the big, armed, armored, sensible aircraft that the establishment had always insisted were the answer. Slow, loaded with turrets and gunners. Flying a long, straight route under a bright moon and a clear sky. The German night fighters found the stream early and simply stayed with it, mile after mile, for hour after hour. 95 bombers did not come back. Around 545 men died in a single night. Hundreds more went into captivity. One night. One raid. That is what the spiral cost. More guns, more weight, less speed, more graves. And the Mosquito? Across the whole bomber war, no other aircraft in the force came home so reliably. The unarmed one. The wooden one. The joke. The men who had demanded turrets and armor weren't stupid. They were certain. And certainty, in 1939, was the most expensive thing in the Royal Air Force. De Havilland had told them, years before, that speed was armor. He was told to fit gun turrets. Somewhere between those two sentences lies a number nobody has ever been able to calculate: the number of young men who might have come home if the wooden wonder had been believed in 1938 instead of tolerated in 1941. By the end, they built nearly 8,000 of them. Bombers, night fighters, photo reconnaissance machines that flew over Berlin alone and unarmed, took a picture, and came home. Anti-shipping strike aircraft. Pathfinders that marked targets for everyone else. One design, doing the work of 6. And it cost the family that built it too. In August 1943, 2 Mosquitoes collided during a test flight. In one of them was Geoffrey de Havilland's son, John, He was 24. The man who had insisted the machine would keep men alive buried his own boy because of it. That is the part the newsreels never showed. But go back one last time. Berlin. The 30th of January, 1943. A cold morning. Flags hanging still. A nation gathered around its radios to hear that it was untouchable. 30 seconds of dead air. Somewhere in that silence, while the sirens were still winding up, while the flak crews were still reaching for their gloves, while the most decorated airman in Germany stood in front of a microphone with nothing to say, 3 aeroplanes made of plywood, balsa and glue turned west for home. They had been laughed at by their own side, rejected by the men who ordered them, built by carpenters and piano makers. And they were, at that exact moment, the fastest thing in the sky over the Third Reich, on their way back to do it again, and again, and again, until the men who had laughed loudest were counting the graves.